Polytechnic.
I just see her smiling. That's what I see every year since 1989.
Genevieve's death changed Catherine's life. She developed a need to help others. She worked to stop violence and lobbied for gun control.
We cannot ignore that what Marc Lépine did was he really wanted to kill women, and his message was clear, and we cannot forget that. We cannot put that aside.
And these are some of the others who pushed for and succeeded in getting gun control legislation passed in Canada in 1995. And that, they say, has saved lives.
We've seen a decline in spousal homicides with firearms by 2/3 since this law passed. Spousal homicides without firearms have not changed. What's changed is murders of women and children with guns.
But now gun control legislation is vulnerable. The Conservative government has begun the process to dismantle the country's long gun registry, arguing it's ineffective.
I couldn't believe how that was possible.
Many of these women believe the battle for gun control was over and won. Not anymore. We live in a world of violence, she says. Our work is not finished. Supporters of gun control say they will fight to save the gun registry in the name of the women whose deaths 20 years ago first inspired the legislation. Lynn Robson, CBC News, Montreal.
As for Canadian police, they continue to express strong support for the registry. But that campaign received a setback late August when this RCMP Chief Superintendent, Marty Cheliak, was removed from his job as the head of the Canadian Firearms Program.
Without the database of registered long guns, the door may be open to unlimited and unmonitored stockpiling of long guns for individuals and groups.
Cheliak was a strong supporter of the long gun registry, and some suspected the government had a role in his transfer.
I question as to why he's been transferred. I question as to who has made that decision to transfer him.
Despite that setback, police did get their message out when an RCMP evaluation of the gun registry was released in late August. And as the CBC's Terry Malewski reported, it wasn't what the government wanted to hear.
Canadians have been very clear. They want us to spend our time and our money focusing on the criminal misuse of firearms and not going after law-abiding duck hunters and farmers.
All last week, the Prime Minister was in the North claiming that long guns do not endanger the public.
Canadians want to keep guns out of the hands of street criminals, so the Liberals, the NDP, and the Bloc Québécois want a registry to keep guns out of the hands of farmers and duck hunters.
But the RCMP report suggests the Prime Minister has it backwards, saying the majority of firearms in Canada are long guns. The majority of firearm deaths in Canada are caused by long guns. Rifles and shotguns, it says, are part of the cycle of abuse for many victims of family violence in rural areas. It says long guns were used in 72% of firearm-related spousal homicides. Furthermore, 77% of police officers killed on the job in the past 10 years were killed by long guns. The obvious example, the murders of 4 Mounties by James Roscoe at Mayerthorpe, Alberta in March of 2005. Roscoe used a rifle. And for all of these reasons, the RCMP's report on the long gun registry says 81% of trained police officers agreed the long gun registry is beneficial and that homicides by long guns are down 10% since the registry started in 1995. Now, the report concludes by directly attacking the government's policy, saying the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police, quote, strenuously opposes any weakening of Canada's current firearms control regime. Lives depend on it, unquote.
When the bill to scrap the registry was first introduced, it was supported by 8 Liberal MPs and 12 members of the NDP, but with just over a week to go before the vote, those numbers changed dramatically. The Liberals had already ordered all their MPs to support the registry, a move known as whipping the vote. And then NDP leader Jack Layton announced he had convinced enough of his MPs to save the registry.
I am very confident that the votes that are needed to continue the registry so that it can be fixed will indeed be there.
Some wondered whether some NDP MPs would defy Layton and stay home on the day of the vote. But Liberal leader Michael Ignatieff told the CBC's Peter Mansbridge that any Liberals who did that would regret it.
You think they will be all there, all on side?
Oh, yeah.
And if they're not?
Consequences.
Meaning?
No, those are consequences I discussed with those members of Parliament, but it's very clear to me. It's very clear to me that we've got unity on this issue.
I'm worried he'll listen to Jack Layton instead of to us.
The Conservatives stepped up their campaign targeting opposition MPs, and the Prime Minister insisted the registry would be scrapped.
And this government and this party is not going to rest until that long gun registry is abolished.
As the vote drew closer, the suspense continued, with both sides going all out to try to make their case. The CBC's Alison Crawford filed this report on the day before the big vote.
Michelle Vardy calls this her passion. She says she loves the skill of shooting, but isn't a big fan of the politics, especially those 8 Liberals and 6 New Democrats who now say they'll change their vote to keep the long gun registry. It means the Conservatives' latest bid to scrap the program will likely be up in smoke.
I really hope that the politicians that said that they were going to support the long gun registry really think long and hard about what they're doing now when they're reneging on their promise to support it.
PC Teeft.
Nadine Teeft says there's good reason to keep it.
What's the name?
The Toronto police officer says she searches the gun registry at least 100 times a day.
And it looks like he has 2 long guns registered. If this registry was scrapped, it would actually be like removing a piece of the puzzle for us. I mean, we're given certain tools, we're given certain pieces to a puzzle, and it would actually be removing that. And it's just removing crucial, critical, necessary information for me to do my job.
Debate. Tonight, armed with a list of supporters, each side made its last formal pitch.
The Canadian Federation of Nurses Unions.
Sergeant Dwayne Rutledge, who is head of emergency response in Nova Scotia.
But the politics won't sway Michelle Vardy.
But crimes aren't being committed by registered firearms. Most crimes being committed are the criminals that don't have registered firearms.
If the long gun registry survives tomorrow's vote, the Prime Minister has said it won't be the final word. The Conservatives are expected to introduce new legislation, all while continuing to rake in money from even more anti-registry fundraising. Alison Crawford, CBC News, Ottawa.
After months of angry debate, on the 22nd of September, MPs finally voted on the bill to scrap the long gun registry. The CBC's Laurie Graham was there and filed this report.
Mr. Ignatieff. Mr. Harper.
For some, the decision was easy. For others, it was the hardest of their careers, especially those who promised to kill the registry but switched their votes.
Mr. Martin Esquimo-Wandafuca.
In fact, people said, of course, that they would join the Conservative Party and work very hard to make sure that I would not get re-elected.
One said yes, even though he says he still doesn't believe the registry works to reduce crime.
Mr. Stauffer.
At the end of the day, I have to represent my constituents.
For Liberal Scott Sims, it was deeply personal.
Mr. Sims.
He changed his mind, voting to keep the registry after his father committed suicide earlier this summer using a gun. Others refused to flip, voting against the registry and their party's position. In the end, it was saved, but barely.
Nays pour 153, 153. Nays contre 151, 151.
If you care about public safety in this country, you want a gun registry, period.
Well, we certainly worked hard to achieve the objective that we set out, which was to make sure that we were able to keep the registry going so that it could be fixed.
But the Conservatives don't want it fixed. They want it gone.
The people of the regions of this country are never going to accept being treated like criminals, and we will continue our efforts until this registry is finally abolished.
This former Harper advisor says today's result could still become a victory for the Conservatives.
Certainly for both NDP and Liberal members who have supported the registry, they're going to have to explain why they did it in the next election, and it's obviously a weapon that the Conservative Party will use against them.
As for the opposition, it has vowed to target Conservative MPs in urban ridings where support for the registry remains strong, which almost certainly means that this emotional debate isn't over by a long shot. And that's News in Review. Don't forget to check out our website at newsinreview.cbclearning.ca. I'm Michael Serapio. Thanks for watching. He witnessed this nuclear explosion.
The blast and the intense heat struck me and I struck the ground. There was rocks and glass and bolts. Everything was movable, was flying with the blast and the intense heat.
Now he's speaking out for peace. On News in Review today, journey back to Nagasaki. Hello, I'm Michael Serapio. 65 years ago, a new and dangerous era began when, on the 6th of August 1945, an American bomber dropped the first atomic bomb on the Japanese city of Hiroshima, and 3 days later dropped another bomb, this time on the port city of Nagasaki.
This is Nagasaki, smashed flat by the second and last atomic bomb dropped on the enemy.
Like the city of Hiroshima, Nagasaki was devastated. About 40,000 people were killed right away. Another 40,000 died from injuries or radiation poisoning in the days, weeks, and months that followed. One Canadian who will never forget that day is John Ford. He was a prisoner of war in a camp just outside Nagasaki, and he witnessed the explosion and its terrible aftermath. The CBC's Red Sharon has his story.
She's been by my side for the whole time, and we've done very well, actually.
John and Margaret Ford were just two youngsters falling in love back in 1940. Fort aux Basques, Newfoundland was a small outport community on the edge of the world when news washed ashore of the terror sweeping across Europe, World War II.
A tremendous battle is raging in France and Flanders.
Like tens of thousands of others, John Ford set out on the great adventure. It soon took him overseas, first to training in England where he became a flight engineer, then much further than he ever thought he'd be in this world.
Singapore is above all one of the ramparts of that freedom for which the British Empire stands.
Well, once we got to Singapore, I was automatically sent to Seletar Air Base on Singapore Island. I mean, the island is 21 miles long by 14 miles wide, and you had 2.5 million people on that island, of all nationalities.
2.5 million people, 130,000 soldiers, mostly British, Australian, and Indian troops. Allied leaders thought it was a fortress. John Ford wasn't so sure. Soon he would be proven right.
On the Sunday morning, a task force from Japan went to work.
First, Pearl Harbor was laid to ruins. Then the Japanese started landing on the shores across Asia.
We knew it was coming. Oh yeah, we felt in our bones it was coming.
The civilized world reels beneath the news that Singapore, proud impregnable bastion, will fall.
1 week after the invasion began, 1 month ahead of schedule, 1 day before Japanese leaders were planning to withdraw because of a lack of ammunition, Singapore surrendered.
That must have been a pretty low point for you, John.
It couldn't be much lower, really, could it? Really. To have someone to say to you that you're going to be a prisoner of war.
100,000 prisoners line up in neat rows.
The battle was over, but for John Ford, the struggle to survive was just beginning.
We didn't know what was going on in the outside world. We had no radios, we had no anything. And it was just terrible. The whole thing was horrible. After being there for a little while, we were singled out to go to Japan. We went to Nagasaki and arrived in Nagasaki, at 5 o'clock in the afternoon on December the 17th, 1942.
But John Ford soon found himself interned in what he thought must surely be hell on earth. Fukuoka Prison Camp number 2.
We were completely at their mercy, and there was no justification in the world for starving us to death, or giving us no medical supplies, or manhandling us.
As the months turn into years, John Ford watches many more of his colleagues succumb to starvation, ill treatment, and disease.
Every man was sick. Your ration was cut because they couldn't go to work and produce anything. Their philosophy is so different from ours.
But the fortunes of war were turning. By 1945, Germany's fortress had collapsed, and the Americans were quickly destroying the Japanese emperor's dream. Firebombing Tokyo, and days after devastating Hiroshima, preparing to unleash the most powerful bomb ever assembled.
Well, the day the bomb dropped, to me, it was a beautiful day just like today, beautiful clear sky. Bang. I looked towards Nagasaki and the mushroom was just forming. And there was pieces of shrapnel, pieces of glass, pieces of rock, and people running and screaming in all directions. The blast and the intense heat struck me and I struck the ground. There's rocks and glass and bolts. Everything was movable, was flying with the blast and the intense heat. We didn't know what had happened to us. The only thing one could think under the circumstances, you think the world's coming